The lights on the platform snap on before I am ready for them, and the first thing I feel is the weight of every eye in the hall landing on me at once. I did not expect the room to go quiet this fast. A moment ago it was full of clicking mandibles, low alien murmurs, and the hum of 1,000 translators working at once. Now there is nothing but silence, and the silence is worse than any noise could ever be. The device above me, the one they call the Occult Array, is already pulling threads of light out of my skull. I can feel it, not painfully, but like something cold moving behind my eyes, sorting through years of memory the way a librarian sorts through old records. I stand still and let it work, because I was told that fighting the process only makes it slower, and slower means more time standing here with 100 alien species staring at me like I am something that wandered onto their stage by mistake. To my left stands a Voska champion, armor-plated in dark red chitin, arms folded, watching me the way a predator watches something it has already decided is beneath its notice. To my right, a member of the Illyrian choir stands with her eyes closed, her mind linked to 5 others somewhere else in the building, moving and thinking as one. Across from me, near the front of the platform, stands Calric of the Draith, tall, pale gold, and utterly still, the kind of stillness that comes from a being who has never once needed to worry about losing. I am the only human standing in this hall. I try not to think about that too hard, because there is nothing I can do about it now. My name is Ethan Cole, and 3 months ago I was still training soldiers on a dust colony most of the galaxy has never heard of. Today, according to the Empire's own selection process, I am supposed to be one of the deadliest warriors humanity has ever produced. Standing here, surrounded by champions who have never lost a real battle in their long lives, that title feels less like an honor and more like a joke someone forgot to explain to me. The overseer running the trial is a tall, sharp-featured woman named Vexthal, dressed in deep blue robes marked with silver rank lines. She walks along the edge of the platform slowly, studying each candidate as the array finishes its work behind them. When she reaches me, she stops. "Human," she says, and the word comes out flat, almost bored. Ethan Cole, rank, Junior Tactical Officer, age, 26 standard years. Combat record. She pauses. Behind her, the display above the platform flickers, and a stream of numbers begins to scroll faster than I can read them. I already know what number is coming. I have known it since the day I signed up for this trial. I just did not expect to feel my stomach drop the way it does now, watching the room prepare to see it too. The scrolling numbers stop. For 1 full second, nobody reacts, because nobody has processed what they are looking at. Then the room erupts. It starts as a low murmur, but it grows fast, spreading from one row of alien delegates to the next, voices rising in different languages, different tones, but all carrying the same shape of disbelief. Somewhere behind me, the Voska champion lets out a short, sharp sound that I am fairly sure is a laugh. The Illyrian choir member opens her eyes for the first time since I arrived, and even she looks caught off guard. Vexthal raises one hand, and the room slowly quiets again, though the tension does not leave it. "There must be an error in the array," she says, turning to the technician standing at the control station near the edge of the platform. "Run the scan again." "There is no error," the technician answers, his voice careful, like he does not want to be the one saying it out loud. "The number is confirmed. Recorded combat fatalities, 70,041. The silence that follows is the loudest silence I have ever stood inside. I already know how this looks. To every species standing on this platform, a death count like that means only one thing. It means a warrior who has failed, over and over, in ways too catastrophic to count. In their world, the greatest fighters are the ones who have never lost, never fallen, never needed to be picked back up. A being who has died 70,000 times is not a warrior to them. It is a walking record of failure, paraded in front of the galaxy's finest as some kind of insult. Calric, the Draith champion, finally breaks his stillness. He turns his head toward me, slow and deliberate, and there is something close to pity in his expression, which somehow feels worse than the mockery around me. Perhaps, he says, his voice smooth and unhurried, the humans misunderstood the purpose of this trial. We are selecting warriors who can survive the coming threat, not warriors who have already been defeated by it 70,000 times over. A ripple of quiet agreement moves through the crowd. Even some of the Empire's own officials, seated in the raised gallery above the platform, exchange glances that need no translation. I feel heat rise up the back of my neck, but I keep my face still. I learned a long time ago that showing frustration in front of an audience like this only gives them more reason to underestimate you. So instead, I stand there, quiet, and let the number sit in the air a little longer. Vexthal studies me for a long moment. Unlike the others, there is no mockery in her expression, only a kind of sharp, careful curiosity, the look of someone trying to decide whether they are looking at a mistake or something they simply do not understand yet. "Explain," she says finally, stepping closer. "You stand before this trial claiming the honor of representing your species as a vanguard candidate. Yet your combat record shows a number no other candidate here has come within a fraction of. Before I strike your name from this list, human, you will tell this hall why I should not." Every head in the room turns toward me at once. I take a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. This is the part I have been waiting for. The part I knew was coming from the second I agreed to walk into this trial. It is easy to mock a number when you do not understand where it came from. It is much harder to keep mocking it once you understand exactly what it means. That number is not a record of failure, I say, and my voice comes out steadier than I expected. It is a record of preparation. A few scattered sounds of disbelief ripple through the crowd, but nobody interrupts. Every species standing in this hall trains its warriors differently, I continue. Some of you rely on numbers. Some of you rely on shared minds, moving and reacting as one. Some of you rely on centuries of unbroken victory, protected by circumstances that never truly test you. Humanity does not have any of those advantages. We do not have shared minds. We do not have the luxury of centuries of easy wins. What we do have is a training method most of you have never needed, because none of you have ever needed to learn how to lose and keep going. Vexthal's eyes narrow slightly, not with anger, but with focus. Explain the method. It is called the Cognitive Warfare Simulator, I say. A closed, controlled environment where a soldier can be placed into any combat scenario imaginable and pushed through it again and again with full sensory feedback, full pain response, and full consequence, right up to the moment of death. Then the simulation resets, and the soldier goes again. Every death is recorded. Every mistake is studied. Nothing is wasted. The murmurs in the crowd shift in tone, curiosity beginning to creep in alongside the disbelief. "You are telling this trial," Calric says slowly, "that you allowed yourself to die, on purpose, 70,000 times. I am telling you that I chose to fail 70,000 times in a place where failing costs nothing but the lesson," I answer, "so that when it finally mattered, I would already know exactly what losing feels like, and exactly how to keep moving anyway." For the first time since I stepped onto this platform, the room is not laughing. Vexthal studies me in silence for a long moment, her expression unreadable, and I can tell she is turning the idea over carefully, weighing it against everything she has ever known about what makes a warrior worthy of standing in this hall. "A dangerous claim," she finally says, "and a difficult one to prove with words alone." "Then don't take my word for it," I say. "Test it." Something shifts behind her eyes, something sharp and interested, and for the first time since I arrived in this hall, I feel like I am no longer standing in front of an audience that has already decided what I am. I am standing in front of one that is finally starting to ask the right question. The number on the display behind me still glows, unchanged, 70,041, and for the first time since I saw it, it does not feel like a weight dragging me down. It feels like a door that has just started to open. Vexthal turns away from me and addresses the gallery above, her voice carrying easily across the now silent hall. "This trial exists, to select warriors capable of standing against the unmaking when it arrives. Our selection method has always measured survival by the absence of failure. Today, for the first time in the history of this empire, a candidate has asked us to measure it differently. Murmurs rise again, quieter this time, thoughtful instead of mocking. I do not offer this candidate a place among the vanguard on words alone, she continues. But I will not strike his name from this trial either. Let the hall decide through combat what it cannot decide through argument. A tall official in the gallery, robes marked in gold, leans forward. You propose a live duel, Overseer, against a human who has never once fought without dying. I propose exactly that, Vexthal answers. Let us see whether 70,000 deaths taught this human anything worth learning. I keep my expression calm, but inside, something tightens. This is not the outcome I expected walking onto this platform today. Yet somewhere underneath the nerves, there is a strange, steady calm settling into my chest. I have stood at the edge of failure so many times that the fear of it no longer controls me the way it once did. Whatever happens next, I already know I can survive being wrong. I have survived it 70,000 times before. Calric steps forward without waiting to be asked, his golden eyes fixed on me with something between curiosity and disdain. I accept, he says simply. 3,000 years undefeated. Let the human learn what a real record of survival looks like. The crowd stirs again, murmurs turning into open anticipation. Whatever doubts filled this hall a moment ago are already being replaced by something else. The hunger for a spectacle, the desire to see the strange human claim proven true or shattered in front of everyone. Vexthal looks back at me one final time before the platform lights shift, signaling the end of the scanning phase. You ask this hall to test your claim, Ethan Cole. In 3 cycles, you will have your chance. I suggest you use the time wisely. I nod once, keeping my voice steady despite the storm building behind my ribs. I intend to. As the platform lights dim and the crowd begins to disperse, I catch one last glance at the number still glowing faintly on the display above me, 70,041, before the screen finally goes dark. For the first time since I arrived in this hall, the number does not feel like something I need to explain. It feels like something I am about to prove. The quarters they give me on Thren Prime are small, gray, and quiet, tucked into a wing of the Empire's guest tower reserved for delegates who do not matter enough to warrant a better view. I do not mind. After the noise of the trial hall, silence is the only thing I actually want. I sit on the edge of the narrow bed and stare at my hands for a long time, turning them over slowly, as if I might find some visible proof of everything they have survived. There is nothing to see, of course. The simulator never leaves scars on the body. It leaves them somewhere else. A soft chime sounds at the door, and when I open it, Vexthal is standing there alone, without the robes of rank she wore during the trial, dressed instead in simple dark clothing that makes her look far less like an overseer and far more like someone who simply wants answers. "May I come in?" she says, though it is not really a question. I step aside, and she enters, glancing briefly around the small room, before turning to face me directly. "I have reviewed your species' military records," she says. "Humanity's induction into the Empire is recent. Your technology is modest. Your numbers are small compared to most member worlds. And yet your combat simulation programs are unlike anything cataloged in our archives. We didn't build them to impress anyone," I say. "We built them because we couldn't afford not to." She studies me for a moment, then takes a seat across from me, folding her hands in her lap. "Explain that to me. Not for the trial, for myself." I take a slow breath, deciding how much of this story to give her. "Humanity has spent most of its history without allies," I say. "No shared minds like the Illyrian Choir, no numbers advantage like the Voska, no technology gifted to us by an older civilization to smooth out our mistakes. Every hard lesson we ever learned about survival, we learned by getting hurt first." "A brutal way to grow," Vexthal says quietly. "Maybe," I answer, "but it also meant we became very good at studying failure instead of hiding from it. When we finally developed the technology for full sensory simulation, someone in our military asked a simple question. If we can create an environment realistic enough to train a soldier's body and mind at once, why not use it to remove the one thing that makes real combat so costly? Not the danger, the permanence. Vexthal leans forward slightly. So you built a place where a soldier could die without truly dying. Exactly, I say. The first time you go through it, it feels exactly like the real thing. Full pain, full fear, full weight of the moment, right up until the point where the simulation ends and you open your eyes back in the training chamber, completely unharmed, with a full recording of every mistake that led to your death. And then you do it again, she says. And again, I answer, as many times as it takes. She is quiet for a long moment, processing this, and I can see the shift happening behind her eyes, the same shift I watched happen slowly across the trial hall. It is one thing to hear the concept, it is another to understand what it actually means to live through it. How many times, she asks finally, did you personally choose to enter that simulator? More than I can count without checking the records, I say, but I remember the first one clearly. I was 19. It was a boarding scenario, 3 hostiles, a narrow corridor, no cover. I froze the moment the first shot went past my head, and I died less than 4 seconds in. And the simulation reset. It reset, I confirm, and I went straight back in, same scenario, same 3 hostiles. I died in 6 seconds that time. A little better, then 4 seconds again, then 11. It took me 43 attempts before I finally cleared that corridor without dying, and by the time I did, I understood every mistake I had made along the way better than I understood almost anything else in my life. Vexthal shakes her head slowly, not in disbelief now, but in something closer to quiet awe. 43 failures, simply to survive a single corridor. 43 failures to learn how to survive that corridor. I correct gently. There is a difference. Failure without study is just pain. Failure with study is a lesson that costs nothing but your pride. For a long moment, neither of us speaks. Outside the window, the lights of Thren Prime stretch out across the horizon, an endless field of towers and transport lanes belonging to a civilization far older and vastly larger than my own. My mind drifts back, unbidden, to a night years ago, long after that first corridor, when the simulations had grown far harder and far more personal. There was one scenario the instructors called the Hollow Ridge, a mountain pass under heavy fire, where the mission required holding a defensive line long enough for a convoy of wounded soldiers to escape. I ran that scenario more times than any other in my training, because no matter what I tried, someone in that convoy always died before reaching safety. The first dozen attempts, I lost the whole convoy. Then I lost half. Then, slowly, one at a time, I learned where to place cover, when to fall back, when to hold ground even as the simulation punished me for it, with the exact same lesson over and over. By the time I finally cleared Hollow Ridge without losing a single soldier in that convoy, I had personally died on that mountain pass 211 times. I remember standing in the debrief chamber afterward, soaked in simulated sweat that felt every bit as real as anything outside the machine, and one of my instructors, an old warrant officer named Grace Bennett, looked at my record with something between pride and sorrow. 211 deaths to save people who were never real, she said, not unkindly. How does that feel, Cole? Like the 212th time we'll save someone who is, I told her. She never forgot that answer, and neither did I. It became something close to a quiet motto among the soldiers who trained alongside me, the idea that every failure in that chamber was simply borrowing pain in advance, so that the real cost, whenever it finally came, would be smaller than it might have been otherwise. I opened my eyes again, back in the quiet gray room on Thren Prime, and the memory fades, though the feeling it left behind does not. You must understand, Vexthal finally says, why this method troubles the other delegates. Every species in that hall today has spent centuries, in some cases millennia, building warriors around the principle of avoiding failure entirely. The Drayth train their champions from birth, in environments engineered to guarantee victory, until true skill outweighs risk. The Illyrian choir spreads danger across a linked mind, so no single failure can be fatal. Even the Voska, brutal as their methods are, rely on overwhelming numbers to absorb losses rather than learning from them individually. None of that is wrong, I say. It works, clearly. Your empire has stood for a very long time. But it also means most of the warriors in that hall today have never actually been tested the way my method tests every human soldier before they ever set foot on a real battlefield. You are saying their victories are hollow. I'm saying their victories are untested, I say carefully. There's a difference. A being who has never truly failed does not know their own limits, because they've never been pushed past the point where failure becomes possible. I have failed 70,000 times in every way I can imagine, and a few thousand ways I never could have imagined on my own. By the time I walked into that hall today, there was very little left that could genuinely surprise me. Vexthal is silent again, but this time the silence feels different, heavier, like she is turning something over in her mind that she does not yet know how to say out loud. The threat we face, she finally says, the one called the Unmaking, is not a war humanity has ever encountered before. It is not a species, not a fleet in the way you understand fleets. It unmakes what it touches, erases it from memory and record as though it never existed. No living being in this empire has ever fought it and survived to describe what that fight was like. A chill runs through me at the way she says it, calm and factual, the way someone describes a disaster that has already happened rather than one still waiting to arrive. Then no one in that hall has any real experience fighting it, I say slowly, which means every champion standing there today, no matter how many centuries of unbroken victory they carry, is about to face something none of their training ever prepared them for. Vexthal meets my eyes, and for the first time since I met her, I see something close to hope, buried beneath the careful control of her expression. Which is precisely why your method interests me, she says, not because it produced a warrior who has died more than any other candidate in this trial, because it produced a warrior who has already learned how to keep functioning after failure, again and again, without breaking. That is not a skill any other species in this hall has bothered to train. It's not really a skill, I say quietly. It's more like a habit. You fail enough times, and eventually failing stops being the thing that stops you. It just becomes the thing that teaches you what to do differently next time. She stands slowly, smoothing the front of her dark clothing, and walks toward the door before pausing, one hand resting against the frame. The duel with Calric will not be simulated, she says, turning back to face me. There will be no reset if you fall, no second chance to try again with the lesson already learned. I understand that, I say. Do you? She asks, studying me closely. 70,000 deaths, and every single one of them ended in a simulation chamber, with your body intact and your mind ready to try again. This will be the first time failure carries a cost you cannot walk away from. I hold her gaze steadily, feeling the truth of her words settle into my chest, heavy and real in a way none of the simulator deaths ever managed to be. Then I suppose, I say quietly, this will be death number 70,042, if it comes to that. Except this time, there won't be a 70,043 to follow it. Something shifts in her expression, not quite a smile, but close to one. Then you understand exactly what is at stake, she says. Rest, human. The trial begins in 3 cycles, and Calric has never once needed to learn what you have spent your entire life learning. Let us see whether that difference matters when it finally counts. She leaves without another word, and the door slides shut behind her with a quiet hiss. I sit alone in the small gray room for a long time afterward, staring at the closed door, thinking about corridors and countdowns and the number 43, the number of failures it took me to learn something as simple as staying alive for 4 extra seconds. Later that night, unable to sleep, I walk to the narrow window and look out over the towers of Thren Prime, lights stretching in every direction, like a galaxy someone had folded down into a single city. Somewhere out there, in quarters far grander than mine, Kael'Rik is probably resting without a single doubt in his mind, because doubt has never been a language his kind learned to speak. I think about what Vexthal said, about the unmaking, about a threat capable of erasing entire memories, entire records, as though nothing had ever stood against it at all. It occurs to me that every champion in that hall today, myself included, is standing at the edge of something none of us can fully understand yet, no matter how many centuries of victories or how many thousands of simulated deaths we carry into it. The difference, I remind myself, is not about who has failed and who has not. It is about who still knows how to move forward once failure finally arrives. Because for the first time in longer than anyone in that hall can remember, failure is no longer a hypothetical question. It is only a matter of when. I place my palm flat against the cool glass of the window and let out a slow breath, steadying the same way I steadied myself 211 times on Hollow Ridge, 43 times in that narrow corridor, and 70,000 other times across scenarios I no longer bother to count individually. 70,000 deaths taught me how to lose without breaking. Tomorrow, I find out if that is enough to finally win. Morning on Thren Prime does not look like morning anywhere I have ever known. There is no sun rising over a horizon, only the slow brightening of artificial light strips built into the sky dome above the city. Time to mimic dawn for the thousands of species who still need such a signal to wake. I am already awake long before the light shifts, sitting on the edge of the bed, running through the same mental checklist I used to run before every simulation, even though nothing about today can actually be reset if I fail. A soft chime at the door interrupts my thoughts. When I open it, I find a young Empire attendant, small and quick-moving, holding a data tablet against his chest. "Ethan Cole," he says, checking the tablet briefly. "The trial arena is ready. Overseer Vexthal requests your presence within the hour." "I'll be there," I tell him, and he nods once before hurrying off down the corridor, clearly eager to be anywhere else. I dress in the simple gray combat uniform provided by the Empire, plain and unmarked, nothing like the ceremonial armor Kael'Rik will likely be wearing. It does not bother me. I have never needed elaborate gear to prove anything. What I need is already inside my head, built over years of failure most people would never willingly choose to experience even once. The walk from my quarters to the arena takes longer than I expect, winding through wide corridors lined with banners representing every species inducted into the Empire. I search briefly for a human banner among them and find none, a small reminder of exactly how new and small our presence here still is. I decide, quietly, that after today, that might finally start to change. The arena itself is unlike anything I have ever seen. It is not a simple ring or a fenced court, but an entire artificial landscape built beneath a massive dome, capable of shifting terrain between battles, from open plains to dense forests to jagged rock formations. Today, the terrain has been set to something resembling broken cliffside ruins, tall stone pillars scattered across uneven ground, offering cover in some places and treacherous drops in others. Thousands of seats rise around the dome in tiered rows, already filling with delegates from every species that witnessed yesterday's trial. The noise is enormous, a wall of overlapping languages and translated commentary, all of it buzzing with anticipation for the strange spectacle about to unfold. Vexthal meets me near the entrance to the arena floor, dressed once again in her formal blue robes, expression composed and unreadable. "The rules are simple," she says, walking beside me toward the edge of the terrain. "This is not a duel to the death by design, though the terrain and weapons provided carry lethal risk if used carelessly. The match ends when one combatant yields, is rendered unable to continue, or is formally defeated according to the arena's judgment systems. Do you understand?" "I understand," I say. "Then understand this as well," she adds, lowering her voice slightly. "Kael'Rik has fought in this arena 11 times. He has never once lost, and he has never once been seriously injured. Whatever confidence he carries onto that field is not arrogance human, It is simply the truth of his record. Records only tell you what already happened, I say. They don't tell you what's about to. She studies me for a long moment, then gives a small nod, almost approving, before stepping back to allow me to pass through the entrance gate onto the arena floor. The noise of the crowd swells the moment I step into view, a mixture of curiosity and open skepticism rolling down from the tiered seats above. Across the uneven terrain, standing near a tall stone pillar, Calric waits, dressed in sleek golden armor that catches the arena lights with every slight movement. He watches me approach with the same calm, unbothered expression he wore yesterday, as though nothing about today could possibly surprise him. "I admit," he says, as I come to a stop several meters away, "I did not expect the Overseer to grant your request. A human, 70,000 failures deep, standing across from 3,000 years of victory. It seems almost cruel to allow this match to happen at all." "Then let's not waste any more time on cruelty," I say. "Let's just fight." Something flickers across his expression, not quite anger, but a thin crack in his composure, small and fleeting. A horn sounds somewhere above the arena, deep and resonant, echoing across the stone pillars, and the crowd noise drops instantly into tense, expectant silence. The match begins. Calric moves first, and he moves fast, faster than I expected even after everything I studied about the Draeth combat style before today. He closes the distance between us in seconds, weapon drawn, a long curved blade, humming faintly with some kind of energy field along its edge. I barely manage to sidestep the first strike, feeling the air shift where the blade passes close enough to graze my sleeve. I do not panic. That is the first thing 70,000 deaths taught me, long before any specific tactic or technique. Panic wastes time. Panic clouds judgment. Panic is the very first mistake almost every soldier makes in their earliest simulations, and it is almost always the mistake that gets them killed before they ever learn anything useful. I let the fear exist somewhere in the background of my mind, present but not controlling, and I focus instead on watching. Calric's second strike comes faster than the first, and I catch it against the flat edge of my own weapon, a simple reinforced blade nowhere near as elegant as his, but sturdy enough to hold. The impact sends a jolt up my arm, and I use the momentum to roll backward behind one of the stone pillars, buying myself a half-second to breathe. "Impressive," Calric calls out, circling the pillar slowly. "Most opponents fall within the first exchange." "I've fallen plenty of times before," I answer, watching his shadow shift along the ground to track his movement. "I just don't stay down." He strikes again the moment I step out from cover, and this time I am ready for it, recognizing the same opening rhythm from his first two attacks, a slight shift of weight before every strike, subtle enough that most opponents would never notice it after only 2 exchanges. But I have spent years training my mind to catch exactly these kinds of patterns, because in the simulator, patterns were often the only warning you ever got before disaster. I sidestep his third strike cleanly, closing the distance instead of retreating, and land a solid hit against his shoulder guard. It does not do much damage against the reinforced armor, but it does something else, something more important. It surprises him. For the first time since the match began, Calric hesitates. It is barely noticeable, a fraction of a second where his rhythm breaks, but I catch it, because catching exactly these kinds of fractures is the entire foundation of everything I trained for. A being who has never truly been challenged does not know how to recover gracefully from surprise, because surprise has simply never been part of his experience. I press the advantage, moving faster now, forcing him to react instead of dictate the pace of the fight. He recovers quickly, faster than most opponents would, and lands a glancing blow across my ribs that sends a sharp burst of pain through my side. I stumble, catching myself against one of the stone pillars, breathing hard. The crowd above roars at the exchange, and somewhere in the noise, I hear Vexthal's voice cutting through faintly, sharp with focus rather than concern. Calric advances again, weapon raised, clearly expecting the fight to end here. In the same clean, decisive way all of his previous matches have ended. I let him get close, closer than instinct would normally allow, and at the last possible moment, I drop low, sweeping his legs out from under him with a maneuver I learned from a simulation scenario I failed nearly 90 times before finally getting the timing right. He falls hard onto the uneven stone ground, and for the first time in 3,000 years, according to every record the Empire has ever kept, Kael'ric of the Draith is on the ground in front of an opponent instead of standing over one. The crowd goes utterly silent. He recovers fast, rolling back to his feet in one smooth motion, but something in his expression has changed. The calm certainty from before is gone, replaced by something sharper, something almost desperate, the look of a being suddenly forced to confront a possibility he has never once needed to consider in 3,000 years of unbroken victory. "You should already be defeated," he says, voice tight with something close to disbelief. "Every calculation, every pattern, every advantage belongs to me in this fight." "Maybe," I say, steadying myself despite the pain still burning along my ribs. "But calculations only work if the person making them has actually been wrong before." "You've never been wrong. I've been wrong 70,000 times. I know exactly what it feels like, and I know exactly how to keep moving through it." He comes at me again, faster and more aggressive than before, clearly trying to end the fight quickly before whatever momentum I have gained grows any further. I meet his next several strikes with everything I have, giving ground slowly, absorbing damage I know I will feel deeply once the adrenaline fades, but never once losing the thread of focus that lets me track the small, telling patterns in his movement. Then, without warning, he changes his rhythm entirely, feinting low before driving a powerful strike toward my chest, a killing blow if it lands. It lands. Pain explodes through my side as the flat edge of his blade strikes hard enough to send me crashing backward onto the broken stone ground, the world tilting sharply around me as the air rushes out of my lungs. For one long, suspended moment, everything goes quiet, distant, the crowd noise fading into a dull hum somewhere far away. I have been here before. Not exactly here, not this arena, not this opponent, but this exact feeling. The sudden crushing weight of a killing blow landing, the world narrowing down to a single point of pain and stillness. I have felt this feeling 70,000 times, in 70,000 different scenarios, and every single time, the simulation ended the moment I stopped fighting to get back up. This time, there is no reset waiting for me, but there is also no reason to stay down. I force air back into my lungs, ignoring the sharp protest from my ribs, and push myself back up onto my feet, slower than before, breathing hard, but standing. Above me, the crowd noise crashes back in all at once, no longer silent, no longer mocking, but something closer to stunned disbelief. Kael'ric stares at me, weapon still raised, clearly expecting the match to be over. "Stay down," he says, and for the first time, his voice carries something other than calm confidence. It carries something close to uncertainty. There is no shame in yielding against 3,000 years of experience. "There's no shame in getting back up either," I answer, steadying my stance despite the pain. "I've done it 70,000 times before. This isn't any different." Something shifts in his expression, and for just a moment, I see it clearly. The exact thing Vexthal was hoping to find buried somewhere in this match. Doubt. Real, genuine doubt, settling into the mind of a being who has never once needed to feel it before. He attacks again, faster now, less controlled than before, the calm precision of his earlier strikes replaced by something more urgent, almost frantic. I recognize the shift immediately, because I have seen it many times before, not in opponents but in myself. In the earliest days of training, when fear first started creeping into the edges of a fight and technique began giving way to desperation. I let him come, tracking each strike carefully, giving ground only when necessary, conserving what little strength I have left after the earlier blow to my ribs. Pain flares with every movement, sharp and insistent, but it no longer controls me the way it might have controlled someone facing this kind of injury for the first time. I have felt worse pain than this, more times than I can count, and every single time, I learned exactly how much of it I could push through before it actually stopped me. Calric swings hard toward my shoulder, and I catch the strike at an angle instead of meeting it head-on, letting his own momentum carry the blade past me instead of absorbing the full force of it. The maneuver leaves him briefly overextended. His balance shifted too far forward, and I take the opening without hesitation, driving my elbow hard into the gap beneath his raised arm where his armor offers the least protection. He grunts in pain, stumbling half a step backward, and for the first time since the match began, I see something close to genuine alarm cross his expression. "This is not possible," he says, more to himself than to me, retreating a step to regain his footing. 70,000 deaths, you should already be broken. 70,000 deaths didn't break me, I say, forcing steadiness into my voice, despite the exhaustion pulling at every muscle in my body. They built me. There's a difference between falling apart and just falling down. I only ever learned how to do the second one. He comes at me one more time, and this final exchange happens fast, faster than anything before it, both of us moving on instinct now more than calculated strategy. I catch his blade against mine at an awkward angle, feeling the impact shudder through my arm, and for a brief, suspended moment, we are locked together, blades crossed, faces close enough that I can see the disbelief still written plainly across his. Then I twist, using the same low technique that dropped him to the ground once already, and this time, combined with his already unsteady balance, it works even faster. His weapon slips from his grip, clattering against the stone ground, and before he can recover, I have my own blade steady at his throat, close enough to end the match cleanly. The arena falls into absolute silence. Calric stares up at me from the ground, breathing hard, weaponless, and for the first time in 3,000 years of recorded combat, utterly and completely defeated. Above us, the massive display screens built into the arena dome flicker, updating the official record in real time for every delegate in the stands to see. Calric of the Draith, undefeated record broken. Victor, Ethan Cole, human. I lower my weapon slowly, stepping back to give him room to rise, and for a long moment, neither of us says anything at all, the silence of the arena stretching out around us like something too large to fill with words. The match is not over. If anything, it is only just beginning. Calric rises slowly from the ground, and for a long moment, he simply stands there, staring at the fallen weapon by his feet, as though trying to understand how it got there. When he finally looks up at me, the disdain from before is gone entirely, replaced by something quieter, more complicated. 3,000 years, he says softly, more to himself than to me. I never once considered that my record might simply mean I had never truly been tested. It doesn't erase what you built, I say, extending a hand toward him. It just means the test finally arrived. He looks at my hand for a moment, before taking it, allowing me to help him steady himself on his feet. Around us, the arena remains locked in stunned silence, thousands of delegates from 100 species processing what they just witnessed, the quiet weight of an unbroken record shattered in front of them by the very candidate they mocked only a day earlier. Vexthal steps onto the arena floor, her expression carefully composed, though I can see something bright and sharp behind her eyes as she approaches. "Let the record stand," she announces, her voice carrying easily across the silent arena, amplified by the dome's acoustics. Ethan Cole of humanity has proven his claim through combat, exactly as this trial demands. He is confirmed as vanguard candidate, representing his species in the defense against the unmaking. A ripple moves through the crowd, no longer mockery, but something closer to reluctant respect. Scattered applause beginning to build across different sections of the stands, spreading slowly the way understanding often does, one small shift at a time. I barely have a moment to process the announcement before the arena's massive display screens flicker again, this time not with match results, but with a bright red alert symbol that instantly silences whatever applause had started to build. Vexthal's expression shifts immediately, her earlier composure replaced by sharp, focused urgency. "Report," she says, tapping the communicator at her wrist. A tense voice answers, filling the arena through the dome's speakers, clearly meant for every delegate present to hear. Overseer, deep space sensors have detected an anomaly entering the outer system. Signature matches confirmed unmaking patterns. Estimated arrival at Thren Prime's defense perimeter, under 2 hours. The word unmaking moves through the crowd like a physical shockwave, gasps and sharp intakes of breath rippling across 100 different species at once. Whatever celebration had been building over the outcome of the duel evaporates instantly, replaced by something far heavier. Vexthal turns to me immediately, all traces of ceremony gone from her voice. This is not the timeline we prepared for. The Vanguard selection process was meant to conclude across several more trial cycles before deployment. We do not have that time now. Then we don't need more trials, I say, steadying my breathing despite the pain still radiating along my ribs. We need whoever's ready standing on that perimeter in under 2 hours. She studies me for a brief moment, then nods once, sharply. Calric, Cole, both of you are confirmed Vanguard, regardless of what remains of this selection process. I need every capable warrior in this arena moving to defense stations immediately. Calric straightens beside me, wincing slightly from the injuries sustained during our match, but there is no hesitation in his expression now, only grim determination. I have spent 3,000 years believing I understood combat completely, he says quietly. It seems fate has decided to test that belief far sooner than I expected. Then let's make sure it fails the test, I answer. Around the arena, delegates begin moving in controlled chaos, alerts blaring through the dome as emergency protocols activate across the entire complex. Armored transport vehicles descend from docking bays overhead, ready to ferry Vanguard candidates and support personnel toward the defense perimeter surrounding Thren Prime. Vexthal leads us quickly through a side corridor branching off from the arena floor, moving fast despite the weight of her formal robes, toward a waiting transport already powering its engines. The unmaking does not fight the way any conventional threat fights, she explains as we move. It does not simply destroy, it unmakes, erasing structures, records, sometimes entire memories of what once existed in a location, as though reality itself is being edited around the point of contact. How do you fight something like that? I ask, climbing into the transport behind her. We have never successfully fought it before, she admits, her voice tight. Every previous encounter ended in retreat, evacuation, or total loss. This is the first time the Empire has assembled Vanguard candidates in time to attempt an actual defense, rather than simply witnessing another disaster unfold from a distance. The transport doors seal shut, and the vehicle lurches upward, engines roaring as it climbs toward the defense perimeter stretching along the upper atmosphere of Thren Prime. Through the narrow viewport beside me, I can see other transports rising alongside ours, carrying champions from a dozen different species toward a threat none of them, myself included, have ever actually faced before. Calric sits across from me, quiet, his earlier composure slowly returning, though something in his posture has changed permanently since the duel. You said something in the arena, he says finally, that my victories were untested. I did not appreciate hearing it at the time. I wasn't trying to insult you, I say. I was trying to explain why the number on that screen yesterday didn't mean what everyone assumed it meant. I understand that now, he says. 70,000 failures, each one small enough to survive, each one teaching something the next attempt could use. It is not so different, I think, from what my people call patience, except far more literal and far more painful. It's not painless, I agree, but it's a kind of pain you can control the shape of if you're willing to put yourself through it deliberately, instead of waiting for the universe to teach you the same lesson the hard way. He is quiet for a moment, watching the horizon shift outside the viewport as the transport climbs higher. The unmaking will not offer us the luxury of 43 attempts to learn its patterns, he says finally. Whatever happens in the next 2 hours, there will be no reset waiting for us if we fail. No, I agree, feeling the same steady calm settle over me that carried me through Hollow Ridge, through the narrow corridor, through 70,000 smaller failures that led to this exact moment. But there's still one thing my training gave me that doesn't depend on second chances. "What is that?" he asks. "The habit of getting back up," I say quietly, watching the defense perimeter come into view ahead, a massive ring of orbital platforms bristling with weapons arrays, already mobilizing to meet whatever is approaching from the depths of space. Whatever happens out there, whatever it costs, I already know how to keep moving after something goes wrong. That's not nothing, especially against an enemy nobody in this empire has ever truly studied before. The transport begins its final approach toward the largest orbital platform, and through the viewport, I catch my first glimpse of it, a distant shape moving against the starfield, wrong in a way that is difficult to describe, edges blurring and shifting as though the very space around it refuses to hold a stable shape. The transport docks with a heavy metallic clang, and the doors slide open onto a platform alive with motion, soldiers and champions from a dozen species moving in organized urgency, weapons and equipment being checked and rechecked under the harsh glow of emergency lighting. Vexthal moves quickly ahead of us, already calling out orders to a cluster of officers gathered near a large tactical display at the platform's center. I follow her toward the display, Kaelric close behind, and the image projected above it stops me cold. The unmaking is larger than I expected, though size is almost the wrong word for it, since the shape captured by the platform's sensors seems to shift subtly even in the recorded feed, edges bending in ways that make my eyes ache if I stare too long. "Sensor readings are inconsistent," one of the officers reports, frustration clear in her voice. "Every scan returns slightly different data. It is as though the object resists being measured the same way twice." "Because it does," Vexthal says grimly. "Every previous encounter reported the same difficulty. Standard weapons fire passes through portions of it without effect. Energy shielding fails unpredictably. The only confirmed method of interaction is direct physical contact, and every recorded instance of that contact has ended in the complete erasure of whoever attempted it." A tense silence follows her words, broken only by the low hum of the platform's defense systems powering up around us. "Then direct contact is exactly what it wants," I say slowly, studying the shifting shape on the display. "It's not a fortress we need to break through. It's closer to a predator waiting for something foolish enough to walk straight at it." Vexthal turns to me sharply. "Explain." "In the simulator, the hardest scenarios were never the ones with the most enemies or the strongest weapons," I say. "They were the ones where doing the obvious thing was exactly the mistake the scenario wanted you to make. If direct contact always ends the same way, every time, for every species that has tried it, then the answer probably isn't to try harder. It's to stop doing the same failed thing more forcefully and start doing something completely different." "Such as?" Kaelric asks. "I don't know yet," I admit, "but I know how to find out. Small tests, careful ones, not throwing everything we have at it and hoping for a different result. We probe, we observe exactly what happens, we adjust, and we probe again, the same way I cleared that corridor 43 attempts in, except this time, every attempt matters, so we make each one count as much as possible before risking it." Vexthal studies the shifting shape on the display for a long moment, then nods slowly. A cautious approach, untested against this threat, but no less tested than anything else the Empire has attempted so far, and considerably more thoughtful than blind aggression. She turns to the gathered officers and champions, raising her voice to carry across the platform. "New protocol. No full assault until we understand its behavior better. Small coordinated teams, controlled engagement, immediate withdrawal at the first sign of unpredictable response. Cole leads the first probing team." A murmur moves through the gathered warriors, some clearly skeptical of taking direction from the same human who was nearly disqualified from the trials only a day earlier, though the memory of Kaelric's fallen weapon on the arena floor keeps most objections quiet. Kaelric steps forward without hesitation. "I will stand with him." One by one, several other champions step forward as well. An Illyrian choir member, whose linked mind offers instant shared awareness across the team, a Voska warrior whose raw physical strength could prove useful if things turned desperate, and a handful of others drawn from species I recognize only vaguely from the trial hall the day before. I look around at the small, mismatched team assembling around me, warriors who yesterday would have barely acknowledged my presence in the same room, now standing shoulder to shoulder, ready to walk towards something none of us fully understand. "Stay close," I tell them, steadying my voice despite the tension building in my chest. "Watch everything. The moment something feels wrong, you call it out immediately, and we adjust. No hero moments. No unnecessary risks. We learn this thing the same way I learned everything that ever tried to kill me, carefully, and as many times as it takes to get it right. The unmaking has arrived. And in less than 2 hours, every warrior gathered on this platform will find out exactly what facing it truly costs." Our small transport craft detaches from the main platform and drifts out into open space, the massive orbital defense ring shrinking behind us as we close the distance toward the shifting anomaly ahead. Through the forward viewport, the unmaking grows larger with every passing second, and the closer we get, the harder it becomes to look directly at it without my vision blurring at the edges, as though the shape refuses to settle into anything my mind can properly hold on to. "Sensor contact confirmed," the Illyrian choir member says quietly beside me, her voice carrying the strange, layered quality of someone speaking both for herself and for the linked minds elsewhere on the platform. The others feel it too. It is aware of us. "Define aware," I say, watching the shape shift again, folding in on itself in a way that makes my stomach tighten uncomfortably. "It is not thinking the way we think," she says slowly, as though translating something difficult into words. "But it responds. When we approach, something in it responds." Calric grips the edge of his seat, jaw tight. "Then let us be the ones who decide the shape of that response, rather than simply walking into whatever it expects." Our transport slows to a careful stop several hundred meters from the anomaly's outer edge, close enough to study it directly, far enough, we hope, to retreat quickly if something goes wrong. I signal for the team to prepare the first probe, a small automated drone loaded with sensors, designed to make brief contact with the anomaly's edge without risking a living being. The drone launches, drifting steadily toward the shifting boundary, and for a moment, nothing happens at all. Then, the instant the drone's outer hull brushes against the edge of the anomaly, it simply stops existing. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased, the space where it floated a moment ago now empty, as though the drone had never been built in the first place, and even the memory of watching it launch feels suddenly harder to hold on to, slipping at the edges the way a dream slips away after waking. "Confirmed," the Voska warrior growls from behind me. "Direct contact means erasure, exactly as reported. But it took a full 3 seconds before the drone actually made contact," I say, replaying the moment carefully in my mind. "It didn't react the instant we launched it. It waited." "Waited for what?" Calric asks. "Proximity, maybe," I say. "Or maybe it needed the drone to cross some kind of threshold first. Either way, that's information. It's not instantaneous. There might be a window, however small, where something could interact with the edge of it without immediate erasure, if we understand the threshold correctly." We send a second drone, this time equipped with a different set of sensors, focused entirely on mapping the exact distance where the anomaly's boundary begins reacting. The drone approaches slowly, and this time we watch closely as the shifting edge seems to pulse faintly the moment the drone crosses an invisible line roughly 15 meters out from what looked, only a moment ago, like the true boundary. "There," I say, pointing at the display as the pulse registers across our sensors. "It's not reacting to contact, it's reacting to something crossing that specific distance. The visible edge isn't the real boundary at all. Some kind of decoy, or maybe just the visible portion of something much larger we can't see directly." The Illyrian choir member closes her eyes briefly, her expression tightening in concentration. The others confirm the same reading from a different approach vector. The true threshold shifts slightly depending on approach angle, but always activates at a similar range before true visible contact. Shulk. This time, when the pulse fades, the drone survives, hovering just outside the true threshold, transmitting data steadily back to our display. A small victory, but a real one, the first successful interaction any recorded Vanguard team has managed against the unmaking. Vexthal's voice crackles through our comm system from the main defense platform. Cole, report. We are reading unusual anomaly behavior from your team's position. We found its actual boundary, I say. It's not where it looks like it is. The visible shape is misleading. Whatever this thing actually is, it's larger and less predictable than the sensors first suggested, but it's not instant, and it's not truly random. There's a pattern here. We just need more data before we understand it fully. You have perhaps 90 minutes remaining before the anomaly reaches direct contact with Thren Prime's outer defense ring, Vexthal says, tension clear in her voice despite her controlled tone. Whatever pattern you find, Cole, find it quickly. I turn back to the team, feeling the same familiar pressure settle over me that I felt in every difficult simulation scenario. The awareness that time is limited, that mistakes carry real cost, and that the only way through is to keep testing, adjusting, and testing again until the pattern finally reveals itself. We push closer, I say. Small, controlled steps, exactly like before. We map the true boundary from multiple angles, and we look for any sign of consistency in how it reacts. Over the next stretch of tense, careful minutes, our team sends drone after drone toward the shifting anomaly, each one mapping a slightly different section of the true threshold, each failure and success alike feeding into the growing picture assembling on our display. Slowly, a pattern begins to emerge, faint at first, then increasingly clear. The threshold is not static. It expands and contracts rhythmically, almost like something breathing, faster in some directions than others, and there are brief windows, measured in fractions of a second, where the boundary contracts just enough to allow safe passage far closer than anyone would have believed possible only an hour earlier. It's not random, I say, watching the rhythm repeat itself across 3 separate confirmed readings. It's cyclical. If we time an approach correctly, during the contraction window, we might be able to get close enough to attempt direct interaction without triggering erasure. Interaction toward what end? Calric asks carefully. Even if we survive approaching it, what exactly do you propose we do once we arrive? I hesitate, because this is the part even 70,000 simulated deaths never fully prepared me for, the moment where preparation runs out and something closer to instinct has to take over. I don't know for certain, I admit, but every previous encounter ended in retreat or total loss, because every previous team tried to fight it directly, with force, the same way you'd fight any conventional enemy. This isn't a conventional enemy. Maybe the answer isn't to attack it at all. Maybe the answer is to give it something it can't erase, because there's nothing there to erase in the first place. The Illyrian choir member's eyes widen slightly. Explain. Every failed contact ended the same way. Structures and drones and, presumably, living beings erased entirely, I say. But what if the erasure isn't destruction, so much as it's a kind of forced forgetting, editing something out of existence because it doesn't fit whatever pattern this thing recognizes as real? If that's true, then maybe what it can't process isn't strength. It's contradiction, something that refuses to resolve into a single erasable shape. Calric frowns. A being cannot simply refuse to exist in a fixed way. No, I agree, but a mind that's been trained through 70,000 different outcomes, 70,000 different versions of the same moment, might come close enough to test the theory. Silence falls across the transport as the weight of what I am suggesting settles over the team. You intend to approach it yourself. Vexthal's voice cuts in through the comm, sharp with concern. Cole, this is exactly the kind of unnecessary risk I instructed this team to avoid. It's not reckless if it's informed, I say, steadying my voice despite the tightening in my chest. We've mapped the rhythm. We know the contraction window. And if my theory about contradiction is right, then the same thing that makes 70,000 deaths sound like a weakness to everyone in that trial hall might be exactly the thing this enemy has never encountered before, a mind that has already survived being wrong in more shapes than it can predict. For a long moment, no one speaks. Then Kelrick straightens in his seat, jaw set with quiet determination. "Then you will not approach it alone," he says. 3,000 years taught me precision. Perhaps precision paired with contradiction accomplishes what neither could manage separately. The Illyrian choir member nods slowly. The others agree. A shared mind experiencing a single event through many perspectives at once may also resist easy erasure, if your theory holds true. One by one, the rest of the team voices their agreement, and something tightens in my chest. Not fear this time, but something closer to gratitude, the strange, unexpected weight of standing among warriors who yesterday barely acknowledged my presence, now willing to walk directly toward the least understood threat the Empire has ever faced, together. We guide the transport carefully toward the mapped threshold, timing our approach against the rhythmic contraction we identified, and as the true boundary pulses and briefly draws inward, I give the signal. We move. The next several seconds pass in a blur of controlled motion, the transport gliding through the narrow window of safety, the strange shifting edges of the anomaly rushing past on either side, close enough to feel like static pressure against my skin, even through the transport's hull. For one terrifying instant, I feel something brush against the edge of my awareness, cold and vast and utterly indifferent, a presence trying to resolve me into something simple enough to erase. It cannot. 70,000 deaths do not resolve into a single, simple shape. 70,000 different mistakes, 70,000 different lessons, 70,000 different versions of myself who failed and adjusted and failed again, all of it tangled together into something too varied, too contradictory, too stubbornly persistent to be reduced to one clean, erasable pattern. I feel the presence hesitate, the same way Kelrick hesitated in our duel, the same fracture of certainty meeting something it has never had to process before. The transport clears the threshold and stabilizes on the far side, and for a long, breathless moment, nothing happens at all. Then, slowly, the massive shifting shape of the unmaking begins to contract, the strange, undefined edges drawing inward, folding smaller and smaller, until finally, with a final ripple that sends a visible shockwave rolling outward across the surrounding space, it simply withdraws, retreating back into whatever depths it originally emerged from, leaving nothing behind but empty, ordinary space and a stunned silence across every comm channel connected to our team. "Confirmed," Vexthal's voice finally breaks through, thick with disbelief. "The anomaly has withdrawn. Threnier Prime's outer defense ring reports no further contact." Cheers erupt across the comm channels, overlapping voices from a dozen species, celebrating in a dozen different languages, but I barely register any of it, still catching my breath, still processing the strange, cold pressure that brushed against my mind only moments earlier and somehow found nothing simple enough to erase. Kelrick lets out a slow breath beside me, some of the tension finally leaving his shoulders. "Contradiction," he says quietly, almost to himself. "You gave it nothing to hold on to." "I gave it 70,000 different versions of the same mistake," I say, managing a tired smile despite the exhaustion pulling at every part of me. Turns out that's a lot harder to erase than one clean success. The transport begins its slow return toward the main defense platform, and through the viewport, I watch Thren Prime grow steadily larger, its lights stretching across the horizon exactly as they did the night before, except everything about how I see them now feels different. Back on the platform, the celebration is loud and chaotic, delegates from 100 species gathering to process what just happened, the first successful defense against a threat that has haunted the Empire for longer than most species here have kept written records. Vexthal finds me near the edge of the crowd, her formal composure finally cracking into something closer to genuine relief. "Yesterday," she says, "this Empire nearly dismissed you before the trial even began, because a single number on a display looked like failure to eyes that had never learned to read it any other way." "Numbers only mean what people decide they mean," I say. "It took the right question to change that." She studies me for a long moment, then nods slowly. Then let this be the lesson this empire finally learns properly. We have spent centuries building warriors who fear failure so completely they have never truly learned from it. Today, a species we nearly overlooked entirely showed us there is another way. Over the following weeks, word of what happened above Thren Prime spreads quickly across the Empire, and slowly, quietly, things begin to shift. The Illyrian Choir requests access to human simulation technology, eager to understand how controlled failure might strengthen their linked minds even further. The Draith, humbled by Kaelric's broken record, begin reworking centuries of training doctrine built entirely around avoiding risk. Even the Voska, proud and stubborn as they are, start incorporating small elements of simulated failure into their brutal training regimens, curious whether it might sharpen their numbers even further. I do not think of myself as a hero standing at the center of all this change. I think of myself, most days, as exactly what I always was, a soldier who learned early that failing safely, again and again, was the only way to eventually survive the moment that finally mattered. Standing on the observation deck one quiet evening, watching the lights of Thren Prime stretch endlessly toward the horizon, Vexthal joins me, her earlier caution replaced by something closer to quiet respect. "They did not choose you because you never failed," she says softly, echoing words I remember saying myself, days ago, in a hall full of skeptical eyes. "No," I agree, watching the horizon glow steadily brighter as the artificial dawn begins its slow rise across the sky dome above us. "They chose me because I failed 70,000 times, and every single time, I got back up smarter than the failure that put me down. Somewhere out among the stars, other threats still wait, unknown and unmeasured, the same way the unmaking once was. But for the first time since stepping onto that platform as the galaxy's least likely candidate, I do not feel like the weakest warrior standing among giants. I feel like proof that giants are not the only ones capable of standing tall, as long as they are willing to fall enough times to finally learn how."